Hello. So today is an exciting day because we are going to start with this new series called Introduction to Django. The objective of this series is to basically get you hands-on experience with Django, to introduce Django from the very basics and towards the end to build a real SaaS product. Right? SaaS stands for Software as a Service, and we are going to make a simple to-do app that you are actually going to deploy on Heroku, and so that you and your friends can use that actual application. All right, perfect. So I hope that I am audible, and let me quickly share my screen. Perfect. I hope that you guys can see the screen as well. All right. So once again, quickly, for the entire lecture notes and the links to videos for this video series will be available on GitHub. So github.com/scalar academy/intro to Django. All right. So this is the URL, Scalar Academy Intro to Django inside GitHub. All right, and here you will find all the lecture notes and the video for the lecture for this entire series. If you are looking for the previous series, the Introduction to Python series, the link for that is also included over here. So if you go over there, you will see the link to our Python series that we have just completed a couple days back. All right, perfect. Cool. So let us begin. Okay, so let me first of all introduce what Django is. Right, so we saw that at the end of the last video. We gave a brief overview of what Django is, but let us go over that once again. So the website for Django is djangoproject.com. All right, and let us quickly see what Django says. So Django says that Django is a high-level Python web framework that encourages rapid development and clean, pragmatic design. Okay, so first of all, Django is a web framework for Python. That is, it allows you to build backend web servers. Right? It allows you to build websites, the backend part of websites using Python. Right? Apart from that, it is extremely powerful, extremely scalable, yet very, very simple. All right. Now, a lot of big websites, including YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, Dropbox, all of these use Django. Right. So if you are wondering whether I can create real life applications using Django, then the answer is yes. I mean, if it works for these large companies, then it is certainly going to work for us as well. Okay. Django is extensively used. So Django was one of the highest downloaded packages of Python. Recently, Flask has come above that, but Django is much more mature, which is why we are going to cover Django in this series. Okay. So Django provides a lot of different features out of the box. So Django provides things like authentication. It provides reusable apps out of the box. It provides first-class security. It works well with all the major databases that are out there, right? Also, Django is very, very scalable, right? So you will see that Django is really, really good for beginners who are diving into the space of creating websites. All right. Cool. Now, the most important thing about Django perhaps is that Django has first-class community support. Now, what do I mean by that? Imagine that you're trying to create a project and you're stuck at some point. Right? Now, what do you usually do? You try to Google your problem. Right? You go to Stack Overflow, you go to GitHub, you watch a couple of YouTube videos. Now, if you're using a framework, if you're using a technology which is not widely known, then you might not be able to get the solution to your problems easily. That is not the case with Django. Django is extensively used, and you will find Django tutorials. You will find questions and answers on Django all across the web. All right. So if there is some point that we feel that, okay, we might need a little help over here, Django community will always be available for us. All right. Cool. So I hope you all are excited to start Django. Right. So before we can start Django, of course, we have to install Python. Now, to install Python, if you are not familiar with Python already, then I would recommend that you go and watch our previous Introduction to Python series. All right, the link for that will be in the video description. Now, if you have already gotten this, if you have already gone through that series, welcome to the Django series. And what we are going to do is, we are going to, first of all, install Python, and then we are going to install an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. All right. Now, most tutorials that you see on Django online, they won't ask you to work with a particular IDE. They will work with a very simple text editor, suppose VS Code or Sublime Text. Now that is not what we are going for over here. The aim of this video series is to build something usable at the end, right? To build something usable in a very short amount of time, and for that we are going to need as much help as possible. And for that purpose, we are going to use an IDE called Pycharm. Now, most of you might have heard of Pycharm. If you have not heard of Pycharm, Pycharm is an integrated development environment for Python development, right? So a lot of Python developers, professional Python developers use Pycharm. Now, to basically install Pycharm, you can just Google Pycharm, go to the website, right? And you can download Pycharm from over here. Okay, now Pycharm has two versions. It has a professional version and it has a community version. Professional version is paid. Community version is completely free. All right. So I would recommend that you go with the community version for now. So just download the community version and we are going to use that. On my system, I have the professional version installed, but we will not be using any professional version, any professional features. So you don't have to really worry about that. Okay, perfect. So once you have installed Pycharm, what we are going to do is we are going to create a simple project using Pycharm in this. All right. If you are familiar with other development environments, so if you usually code in VS Code, or if you usually code in Atom or Sublime Text, or even Vim, for example, then feel free to use your own development environment. We are going to follow Pycharm because it will have certain advantages for us. All right. Now let me quickly go over what advantages Pycharm will provide. For this particular video series. So Pycharm, first of all, has first-class Django support, right? So basically, whenever we are trying to create a project in Django, whenever we are trying to structure files, whenever we are trying to refactor the code, the Pycharm will help us out a lot. Secondly, in my experience, if you are a beginner to programming, irrespective of what language you are using, or irrespective of what IDE you are using, if you are a beginner, then it really helps to have the support of an IDE. Right? So back when I was in class 11th or 12th, I used to learn Visual Basic, right, and the .NET framework, and we had this amazing IDE provided by Microsoft, which was the Visual Studio. Right now, IDE will help you in a lot of different ways. So basically, giving you intelligence, telling you the documentation of the functions that you are about to write. It allows you to explore code and learn things very quickly. All right, which is why we are going to go with Pycharm. If you don't want to go with Pycharm, that's completely okay. I mean, you can totally use any other development environment that you want. All right, cool. So let me quickly start Pycharm. So I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to start Pycharm. Just give me a second while I clean up the rest of the things. So I'm quickly going to open my terminal and I'm going to remove some of the things that we have. Perfect. So I am in this particular directory called Introduction to Django. I'm in this terminal. I'm in this particular directory. So I'm in my home folder. So if I print out the current directory, I'm in my home folder inside a directory called Introduction to Django. Right. And in this, I have created a folder called Lecture 1. So I'm just going to go inside this Lecture 1 folder. And we are going to create. So currently this folder is empty. We are going to create our first Django application in this particular folder. All right. Perfect. Dhruv is asking, is Anaconda also an IDE? Well, Dhruv, Anaconda is kind of an IDE. However, Anaconda is used more when you are working with data science and similar projects. Like, I would not recommend you to use Anaconda for Pycharm or for Django development. All right. Perfect. Shashwat is asking which command line are you using? So Shashwat, don't worry about that. If you are wondering, why does my terminal look something like this? Why does my terminal look something like this? Then I have customized my terminal a lot. Don't worry about that. We might discuss that in one of the future lectures. All right. If you absolutely want to know, then I'm using the Quake terminal and I'm using the conch shell on top of that. Okay. Cool. Let's quickly see if we have any further questions before we move on. All right. Perfect. Cool. So this seems like these are all the questions. Sparsh is asking, Parth is asking, sir, what is the difference between Django and Flask? So Flask is also a web framework for Python. However, Flask is a micro framework, right? So Flask provides you some basic tools and technologies to quickly start your website and get them up and running. But Flask does not provide a lot of features out of the box. Flask is, Flask is really, really extensible. So whatever you can do in Django, you can also do in Flask. But if you want to do it in Flask, you will have to basically configure different things yourself. So you will have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to integrate it with with an ORM, right? So that you can talk to the database. You will have to spend a lot of time figuring out how the authentication should work. And when you are doing that, a lot of the times things can go wrong. For example, a lot of the people who try to implement authentication themselves, they leave certain loopholes, they leave certain backdoors inside their applications, which they are even not aware of. Now, when you work with Django, all of this is taken care for you, because the experts who are in the business of web framework development, they've already taken care of all these different things for you. All right. Perfect. Cool. So let us quickly go back to our Pycharm. Now I'm going to click on new project. So I'm going to click on new project, and I'm going to start a Django project. All right. I'm going to start a Django project from here. Now I'm going to choose the location of my directory, which is the lecture1 directory. Inside that, I'm going to create a basically first application, first app project. All right. Now notice that I have selected Python 3 as the base interpreter over here. So Python will automatically create a virtual environment for us. Right. So we looked at virtual environment in the previous series, in which in the lecture where we talked about how to organize files and how to work with virtual environments. Right. So Python will automatically create a virtual environment for us at this location. Right. So inside the first app folder, it will create a folder called VM, and it will put a Python 3.8 virtual environment over there. Perfect. So the moment I click create, it will start creating a Django application for us. All right. Cool. So it will take some time. It will create the virtual environment, and once it is done, let us just quickly wait for it to be done, and then we will begin. Perfect. So it is taking some time. It is creating the virtual environment. It is downloading files over there. So it is downloading things like pip. It is downloading Django. It is downloading all the dependencies, and it is putting them in the virtual environment. Once everything is done, you will get something like this. Right? So on the left over here, you will see a project browser. So you will be able to see what folders you have, and inside that, what files you have. Down over here, you will have something called the terminal. Right now, we will be using the terminal. This is just like the terminal that you can open on your own, right? So you can totally open your own terminal. So if I open this terminal, it will open up like this. Now the difference between this terminal and this terminal, Python terminal is just that this Python terminal automatically has the virtual environment activated for us, right? For example, if I go to my normal terminal, and if I go to my particular directory, my project directory, so my project is in my home folder /introduction to Django /lecture1 /first app. Right? If I go to this directory, you notice that I'm in this particular directory. If I try to run this thing, if I do which Python, I will see that it is currently saying that Python is not installed in my system. Right? So if I try to do which Python 3, it will say that it will use the Python 3 binary from this location. Right? It will use the Python 3 binary from this location. Now, as we see, we have a virtual environment. In this directory. To activate that virtual environment, what command did we use? Yes, that was source venv bin activate. Right? And once I basically execute this command, then we will have activated the virtual environment. Well, this is for the normal terminal. But if you look at the Pycharm terminal, automatically the virtual environment will be activated for us. So let me quickly see how to increase the font size. Just give me a second, guys. Let me quickly increase the font size, and then we will continue. So editor general font size. Let me make it something like 20, and let us hope that is a little better. for everyone, or perhaps let us make it a little more, 22, I guess. All right, so is the screen clear now? Yes, guys, is this visible? Is this visible? Yes, no? Great. The screen is a little bit blurred. I'm not sure why that is the case. Let me try increasing the font size a little bit further so that things are really, really clear for us. Let us make it to something like 25. 25. All right, now the text should be really, really big. Cool. So I hope now at least things are clear over here. Okay. Now, once again, as we were saying, if you look at the terminal, that Pycharm has provided us, then automatically the virtual environment has been activated. So if I try to look at which Python binary is being used, if I type which Python, then you will see that the Python binary inside my virtual environment is being used automatically. All right. So similarly for the pip installation, this pip installation is coming from my virtual environment. So I can come over here and I can type basic commands, like I can see what dependencies Pycharm has automatically installed for us. Right. So if I do pip list, then I will see that Pycharm has gone ahead and installed some things like Django, ASGIRef, SQL parse, and PyTZ. Right. It has installed some of the dependencies for us automatically. Perfect. So let me clear the screen, Control L, and let me minimize this terminal. Now let us quickly go through what files we have on the left-hand side over here. So when we created this app, this folder and this directory structure, this file structure was automatically created for us. All right. Cool. So inside this, on the left, we have this main folder called first app. And inside that, we have everything. Right? Inside this first app folder, we have everything. Inside that, we have another folder called first app once again. Right? And this is the location where your code will go. This is the location where your Python code will go. All right. Inside this, we see a dunder init.py. Right. This is underscore init__.py. It is pronounced as dunder init. All right. Dunder stands for double underscore. Now this, as we saw in the module section in the previous series, dunder init.py just tells Python that first app is a module. Right? First app is a package, and to initialize that package, it will automatically call this dunder init.py. So if you're going to import first app, it will automatically import this dunder init.py file. All right, perfect. Apart from that, we have two very important files over here. The first file is urls.py. All right, in urls.py, you see some sort of comments over here. You see some imports being made, and finally, you see a list. Right, a Python list which has the variable name URL patterns, and inside that Python list we have path admin.site.urls. Right, now what this admin stuff is, we will come to that later on. Okay, perfect. Some students are still complaining that the screen is still not visible clearly. Interesting. I'm not sure how to resolve that. I hope that is not the case. Let us just try to continue like this. And if this video does not turn out to be very good, we might have to redo this video. All right. Perfect. Cool. So this was the urls.py file. Of course, right now it will not make a lot of sense, but do not worry. As we go ahead, we will explain these things. There's a lot of demand for using the light theme. So let me quickly switch the theme over here. Let me go to settings, appearance, and let me change the theme from the dark theme to IntelliJ Light, and quickly hit apply. All right. So is this better, guys? Is this better? Yes, no? This is the white theme. I am not sure if this is better or not. This is nice. Okay, this is a little too heavy on the eyes, but let us continue with this. All right. Cool. So we went over urls.py. Now let us quickly look at settings.py. In settings.py, we have all the configuration for a Django project. Now, by default, some default values are generated for you. So you will notice that Settings.py is importing a pathlib library. It is declaring a base dir, which will just be the first app folder over here. It is declaring something like a secret key, and this looks like a really weird random string. Do not worry about this, but this is needed. All right, do not really worry about this. It has set debug to true, right? So when we actually deploy our application, this debug will be set to false, right? But since we are developing it at the moment, we want all the warnings, all the errors to be displayed in the web browser, right? So which is why we have set debug equals to true. All right. Apart from that, you will see two very important things. You will see something called installed apps. Right? Now, currently, we have not talked about what apps are, but as we go forward, we will be creating our own Django apps, right? And whenever we create a Django app, we have to tell Django that, okay, you have to look for this app inside our project, right? So we will be adding things to this particular list soon enough. All right. Perfect. Moving down, we have middleware. Currently Django has installed a lot of middleware for us. Now, if we want to add or extend this middleware, we can get extra packages from the internet and we can put that over here. So if you want to add more Django middleware, we can totally do that. All right. Apart from that, we see some root URL config, some templates, and some other stuff. Let's not worry about this right now. Just understand that the settings.py is the main configuration file for our project. All right. Moving on, we have these two files, asgi.py and wsgi.py. Right now, these files are just so that Django can work with ASGI or WSGI compatible servers. Right? You don't have to worry about all of these. We will discuss that later as we move on. Right? When we actually deploy this application, we will be discussing what ASGI is, what WSGI is, and why these files matter. All right. Perfect. Cool. So let me quickly close all these tabs for you. Now, if I try to run this application, I have two ways of running this application. In Pycharm, I have this nice green button on the top right. Okay, so you see this, right? This green button. It says first app, and it gives me a green button over here. Right? So I can click this green button to run the application. Alternatively, I can go to the terminal. And I can type the following command. I can type Python manage.py run server. Right? And if I do Python manage.py run server, this will start the manage.py file for us. Now notice that inside this first app, we had all these different files that were sitting for us, right? That were our basic project. Apart from that, Django has also created this manage.py file. Right? Apart from that, Django has also created this manage.py file. We will not be touching this file. We will not be changing anything inside this file. This file is something that Django provides so that you can talk to your website. You can manage your website. Right? So you will be sort of like the administrator for your website. And as the administrator, you might have to perform certain actions on the website. So this manage.py will help us do that. Okay. So if I run Python manage.py run server, it will start the application as a web server. If I hit enter, it will take a couple of seconds to run. It will say that you have some unapplied migrations. Right? Let's not worry about what these unapplied migrations are right now. We will run these migrations soon enough. More importantly, what it says is that starting development server at 127.0.0.1 port 8000. Now 127.0.0.1 is the local host. Right? So this IP is an IP that points to my own computer, right? And 8000 is the port. So if I try to open this link in the URL in the browser, I see some website has popped up, and the website currently says Django on the top left, and it says the install worked successfully. Congratulations. And there's a nice rocket over here. All right. So basically, this is the default Django application that is created for us automatically. All right. Now, so far, we have not done anything to create this website, but already a website is available for us. Okay. So we will be changing this website. We'll be adding and customizing this website as we go on in the series. Perfect. Let us quickly wait and see if we have any questions at the moment. Niraj is asking, what is the role of middleware? Well, middleware is basically any sort of extra code that perhaps you might not have written or you might have written that provides some extra functionality. For example, for authentication or for connecting to the database, you might have to use some middleware, right? So let us quickly see what middleware we currently have installed in our application. So once again, if I go to settings.py, and if I look at this middleware thing, so I see several middlewares over here. One is security middleware, right? So this will basically make sure that this will basically configure a lot of security settings for me. Then I have a session middleware. This will make sure that I can work with client side HTTP sessions, right, in my application. There's some common middleware. There's some CSRF view middleware. Now CSRF is basically CSRF tokens are basically something that you send so that your forms can be validated, so that you can make sure that nobody is submitting fake information to your website, to your forms. Right. Apart from that, we have authentication middleware. So this is so that users can log in, they can register onto your website, things like that. We have a message middleware, and we have an X-frame options middleware. Right. So all of these are various things that Django has configured out of the box to provide the best level of security for us. All right. So as we go on, we will be adding more middleware to it. Let's not worry about it right now. But middleware is just some software that will enhance the capabilities of our application, of our website. Perfect. Okay, so this was the settings.py. Now let us quickly go back to the terminal, and we see that our web server is still running. Right? We see some extra output has come over here. So it says quit the server with Control-C. So we know that if we have to terminate the server, I can just press Control-C in the terminal to kill this server. But apart from that, I see some weird output getting printed over here. It says get slash HTTP 1.1 200, and it gives me a particular value over here. It says get slash static admin CSS fonts.css and so on. So this is basically logging what get requests the browser has made to our web server. Right? So basically, when I open this particular tab, when I open this particular URL in my browser, the localhost 8000 port, then what happened was the browser basically tried to display this page. How will the browser display this page? The browser will first make a call to the web server. It will make a GET request to the web server for this particular page, for 127.0.0.1 port 8000. And Django is telling me very helpfully over here that a GET request was received. Okay, a GET request was received at this URL. The URL was slash. Right, so basically the relative URL for my website is just slash. All right, and it is telling me that the response to this was 200. So 200 is a successful response. Right, 200 is a success response for HTTP, and it is telling me how many bytes of data was sent. Okay, so this was the web page. Now in this web page, so if I go to this web page once again, if I go to view page source, then in this web page we have several other links. So we have a link to static admin CSS fonts.css. This will load all the fonts in the web page. We have some other links as well over here. So if we go down below, we have several other links over here, which might, let me just quickly see what other links we have. So it seems that that is the only link. We might have some other links that we might come across. All right. So basically we see that the browser, to load this particular page, browser will have to load the fonts from here, right? The fonts.css from here. So the next request that we see is the get request at static admin CSS fonts.css. All right. So now this will serve. So notice that the folder over here is static. Right. This is a static file that Django is going to serve to us. Once again, the response to that was 200, which is successful, and we had some byte size, right? So how big this file was, and we see 3 subsequent get requests. So inside this fonts.css, some fonts have been referred to, right? So Roboto Light, Roboto Regular, and Roboto Bold. So the web page very quickly fetches these things for us as well. All right. So that is basically what this output means. Now, once again, to terminate this web server, I can press Control-C. I can press Control-C on my terminal, and we see that the web server is terminated. Now, if I go back and if I try to reload this page, then I will get an error that the site cannot be reached because my server is no longer up. All right. Perfect. Cool. So let us move on. This site, I mean, we have a site up and running, but this site doesn't really do much, right? And we have not really done anything to customize this website. So let us start with a very simple customization. we are going to add an application, right? We are going to add a Django application to this website. To do that, let me come over here. So we are in the terminal once again, and I'm going to execute the command python manage.py start app, right? And I'm going to give it the name of an app. So let me name it something like app1. All right. So I'm in the terminal in my directory. I'm going to execute the command python manage.py start app. Everything is lowercase, no spaces, followed by the name of the app, app1. Now, as soon as I hit enter, nothing really happens on the terminal, right? Nothing really happens on the terminal, but something has happened in my directory. So a new directory called app1, a new directory over here has been created. And inside this directory, we have several other files. So we have a migrations folder, we have an admin.py, we have apps.py, we have models, tests, views. Right now, as we go on, we will be working with these things. So in the views.py, we will be creating our views. So views, so basically Django follows this principle of MVC framework. Right? MVC stands for model view controller, right? So Django doesn't follow this very strictly. Django merges some of the things. So just give me a moment over here. Right? Django merges some of the things. My laptop is not too fast today. But the basic framework that is being followed is a model view controller framework. So this is the section, this is the views.py, in which we will be adding our views. Moving on, we have a test.py where we can add our test cases. We have a models.py. Now, model is everything that will be persisted, that will be stored in the database. So over here, we will, in this particular file, we will be interacting with the database. We will be creating several Django models using the Django ORM, right? ORM stands for the Object Relational Mapper. Then we have the apps.py. In apps.py, we are just declaring what applications this particular application is using. We have the admin.py. Do not worry about this once again. And once again, we have the migrations and init.py. All right. So this folder and all these files was created for us when we executed this particular command in the terminal. So we executed the command python manage.py start app1. All right. Perfect. Now, before we can use this application, let us make a few changes to this. Right. So let us go to our views and let us create our first view over here. Okay, let us create our first view over here. So we are going to give it a function like def index, and we are going to accept a request. We are going to accept a request. Now, what is a request? As we said, when the browser fetches a particular page, it sends a lot of information to us. So it sends us what page we are looking for. It might send us what cookies the user has on their site. It might send us a ton of other information. Right. It also tells us what type of request the browser is making, right? So either it can be making a GET request or a POST request or a PUT request and all the other types of HTTP requests. So what we are basically telling is in this function, right? In this function, whenever a request to a particular web page is made, what web page is made, we don't know about that right now. But when a request to a particular web page is made, take that request, take all the information in that request and call this function with that information. All right, call this function with that information. In this, we are not really going to use the request thing at all. We are simply going to return something. So we are going to return an HTTP response. Right? And in this response, we are going to provide some text over here. So I can say, hello world, hello. This app seems to be working fine. All right. Now, because we have used the function HTTP response over here, we have to import this. Right now, Pycharm gives me a very nice, helpful pop-up over here. It says that, okay, I know that HTTP response comes from django.http.http response. So if I just click this button, it will automatically import this for me. All right. So, I mean, if you're not using Pycharm, you can also type this manually from django.http import HTTP response. All right. So basically, whenever someone goes to a particular URL, we will define what that URL, but when someone goes to a particular URL, a request will be made. That request will be sent to this function, this index function, right? And this index function will send this as a response. So this is what we will see in the browser. All right. Perfect. Cool. Let us try to run this. Before running this, we will have to do some configuration. So first of all, we will have to tell it what URL should this page be displayed on, right? So what really URL should this page be displayed on? To configure that, let us quickly create a new file, right? So let me go over here. Just give me a moment. Let me also connect my charger. So just give me a moment, guys, while I connect my charger, and then we will be back. All right, we are back. Okay. So once again, this view is basically going to accept a GET request to a particular URL, and it is going to return this as the response. And now let us configure what URL this view will be displayed. So for that, we are going to go in this app1 folder, and we are going to create a new file. We are going to create a new Python file, and that file will be urls.py. Okay, so notice that this is plural. This is urls.py. Okay, so this new file has been created over here. Inside this urls.py, let us try to configure the path that will actually display that particular view. So for that, we are going to give something like URL patterns. So we have to define a list called URL patterns. Right now, this urls.py will be very similar to the urls.py that Django had automatically created for us. Right. So in the file that Django had automatically created for us, we had imported certain things. So from Django URLs import path, from Django concept import admin, and we define the URL patterns. Right. We are going to do something very similar in our own urls.py inside this app file. So we are going to define URL patterns. In the URL patterns, we are going to say that, okay, let us define a path. Let us define a path. And the path, let us give a particular path for this request. Right? So if someone enters an empty URL over there, then the request will be routed to this particular path. And where should this request go? So once a request to this URL is made, take that request and reroute it to a particular location. So we want it to be rerouted to this particular index function. Right? Inside views.py, we want it to be rendered forwarded to index function. So let us come over here and say views.index. Right? So basically inside the views file, this index function. Now, of course, we are going to have to import that, right? So to make this work, we are going to have to import views. Import views. Now, notice that this views is inside our app1. This views is inside our app1, and our app1 is actually a package inside our module. Right? Our app1 is inside a pack. It's actually a package inside our module. So we will have to use a relative import over here. It will have to use a relative import over here. So we can come over here and say from the current folder, from the current package, import views. And now this import will work correctly. Okay. So now that we have this, we are defining that, okay, if a request when empty URL comes, then please send it to this function views.index. And let us also give this a name called index. Right. Now, do not worry about what this name is right now. We will see why this name is useful and where do we really use it later on. Okay. Now, currently we are getting an error at this path function. It is saying unresolved reference path. Right. So we have to import this function as well. So let us quickly do that. Let us say from Django.urls import path. Right. So now this URLs has been correctly configured. Once again, in the urls.py, we are simply telling Django that if a request comes to this URL, what is the URL? The empty URL. If a request comes to this URL, please send that request to this function views.index. And where is this function? This function is over here. Right? Perfect. Now, this is not enough. We have to configure it a little bit more. So now if we go, so this was our own this was our own urls.py. If you look at the previous url.py, the one that Django had already created for us, currently this is the main urls.py. Right? Whenever Django is running your project, Django will be looking at this particular urls.py to define all these things. So we have to tell Django that, hey, it is fine if you are looking over here, but please also look in this urls.py that I have just created. right? Please also look at this urls.py that I have just created. So for that, we are going to add another path over here. We are going to add a path and we are going to give this a name. So we are going to give this a name, something like app1. And in this, we are going to include our own URLs file. So include app1.urls, right? So basically, we have added another item to the list, the URL patterns list. The pattern we have added is, this is the path to the URL, right? This is the path to URL app1 slash, and we are saying include app1.urls. Like now, once again, this include thing we have to include, so we can just include it from Django.urls. So let us include this. Let us import this function include. Now, what we are saying basically, what we have just told Django is, whenever someone makes a request to this particular path, right? So whenever someone goes to something like HTTP localhost 8000, right? So this is where our server is running. Inside this, if someone goes to app1, then after this, wherever that person goes, right? After this, wherever that person goes, take this URL and send it to app1.urls. Right? Take this xxxx URL and send it to app1.urls. And whatever app1.urls will do with it, it will do with it, right? I don't really care about it. So basically, if someone now goes to localhost / app1, if someone goes to this particular location, then what will happen? This URL, right? So there's nothing after this. So app1.urls will be called with an empty URL. Okay, app1.urls will be called with an empty URL. Inside the URL patterns, we will see that yes, we are matching an empty URL over here. So because this empty URL is matched, we will go inside views.index, and this function will be called with a request. All right, and we should see this in the browser. Seems to be working. Let me fix the typo over here. Okay, perfect. Now let us quickly run this application once again. So once again, I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to say Python manage.py run server. Right, and when I hit enter, the server is up and running once again. If I go to the URL again, we see that nothing really has changed. Right? We see that nothing really has changed, except for the fact that we are now getting that the page does not exist. Right? We are not now getting that the page does not exist. Well, let's not worry. Let us go to /app1. Right? Let us go to /app1, and over here we see this response being printed out. Is that clear? So this is the response that we had coded over there. This is the response that we had told Django to give us inside the views.py. This is the response that we had asked Django to give us. Is this clear, guys? Yes. Cool. Now there's a lot of things that we have skipped over here. So we currently don't understand what apps really are. We don't understand what the admin is, what the URL patterns are, what a view is. Let's not worry about that right now. As we go on, as we explore further, we will be taking each and every one of these things and explaining them in much more detail. So we will be talking about what views are, what models are, what the Django admin is, what these different URL patterns are, and what apps really are, and how to use these apps. All right. Cool. So this is a very brief introduction to Django project. Today, we just installed Django. We installed Pycharm. We created a simple Django project. And so we saw a default website being printed out. Then we added an app to it. That app was called app1. And we simply configured a simple view inside this app1. And we actually rendered that out. So now we have a website. If someone goes to this website /app1, they will be able to see this particular response. Now, once again, this is not very useful, but as we go forward, we will be customizing these things. All right. Perfect. Raghav is asking, do we not need to add it to the apps the setting? Well, Raghav, for now, no, we don't have to do that, right? So if I go to settings.py, and if I look at the installed apps, I don't really see my app1 over there, right? I don't really see my app1 over there anywhere, right? My app1 is not over there. That is not going to be any trouble right now. So I'm going to explain why, which sort of apps you have to put in this installed apps. All right. Now Spurs is asking, can you please push this on Git? Definitely, Spurs. So let me quickly go to my parent folder and let me see what changes have been made. Git add. So I will basically make sure that this VM is not pushed to the Git, and then I will push it to the Git. Right? Let me actually do that. So let me create a git ignore over here. Vim.git ignore. All right, this seems to be fine. Let me quickly add this. Git commit, add simple Django app. All right, perfect. Now, once again, if this looked kind of scary to you, do not worry. As we go on, we will also be understanding in some video series, we will also be looking at what Git is and why it is useful. Right? Let's not worry about it right now. But whatever code we have done till now, whatever code we showed till now, we have already updated that on the GitHub repository. So if you go to GitHub, you will see lecture 1 first app over there. And inside this, you will be able to see whatever things, whatever files we had created. Right? So let us quickly see if we have any other questions. And then we will basically end the lecture. And we will continue with Django in this particular video series once again from tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. every day. All right. Perfect. Let us quickly see what questions we have. Pranay is asking, can you please explain the last part? If nothing is there after it, then it will redirect. But something like XXX is there, where will it get redirected to? Pranay, very good question. So let us actually see what happens. Right. So basically, I'm going to this URL 127.0.0.1, port 8000, app 1, and after that, let me put something like XXXX. Right. Let me put this. So it is telling me page not found. Right. It is telling me page not found. Let us quickly see what really happened inside. Right. Let us see what happened. So Django looked at this URL.py and Django said that, okay, the URL begins with app1. This URL that I have asked for, this begins with app1. So I should send the remaining request to this particular URL's file. Right? So the remaining request, which is XXXXX, got sent to this particular URL's file. Now, in this URL file, we have these patterns. Right? We tried to match. Okay, is the path empty? No, the path is not empty. Right? So XXXX will not match the empty path. So, but that is all the patterns that we have decided. Right? That is all the patterns that we have defined. So Django says that, all right, this is a pattern that I don't really have a page for. Okay, Django says this is a pattern that I don't really have a page for, which is why Django is giving us this page not found error. All right. If instead of this, let me copy this multiple X's and let me put this in the path. Let me put this in the path over there. Now, if I try to reload this page will work. Now, if I try to reload this page will work. But our original page with the empty URL, this will no longer work now. But if I want both of them to work, I can simply copy paste this. I can simply duplicate this line, and I can have both these URLs. So even if someone goes to this URL inside app1, or if someone goes to the empty URL inside app1, both will get redirected to the same function. So now if I try to run this page works as well, and also does this page work. Is that clear? Perfect. Chirag is asking, we have defined that URL in app1 URLs file for redirecting else nothing. All right, so Chirag was just answering Pranay's question. Thank you, Chirag. Okay, so that is basically it. If you have any further questions, let us see them in the chat. Otherwise, the lecture is basically ended. Please make sure that before tomorrow's lecture, you have Python installed, you have Pycharm installed, or whatever development environment you would like to work for. Okay, if you don't have any previous choices, I would strongly recommend that you install Pycharm. Okay. Chirag is asking, sir, I am from Node.js background and have attended Intro to Python series. How do I get started with Django? From basics onwards or projects in Django? So basically, Chirag, this series is exactly meant to get you started with Django. Right? So I would recommend that if you have already covered the Introduction to Python series, just stay along with us in this series, and we will be making a to-do application in this series using Django. Once you are done with this series, towards the end, I will also be giving you certain pointers where you can go from here. Right? So just like we did in the previous series, we gave you some resources and we told you what to look for next, right? Where to learn things next from. So just like that, in this Django series, towards the end, we will also be telling you what has to come next. Perfect. Jay Surya is saying how to have a default error page. Well, Jay Surya, currently this default error page, this default 404 page, this is something that Django provides to us out of the box. Right now, let us quickly see over here. Let us quickly see over here what it says. It says that you are seeing this error because you have debug equals to true in your settings file. Right. So if I go to my settings file and if I change that, if I go to my settings file and if I change the debug equals to true to false, and if I rerun this application, it will currently not allow me to run this because run server actually runs for debug mode. But basically in the production environment, instead of giving me this nice page, it will just return me a standard 404 error message, right? Now I can totally customize that. Let us not worry about how to customize that right now. There is some things that you can do. You can tell basically Django that, all right, if this is the error code, then this is the kind of page that you should show. All right, perfect. Vinay is asking, is Jupyter okay? So Vinay, I would strongly suggest that no. So Jupyter provides you with something like a notebook, right? Jupyter is basically aimed so that you can do interactive programming. So it is very useful when you're exploring data sets. So basically you have a data set, you quickly load it, you try to run some functions on it, you try to change the data set somehow, and you basically see the output right away. So Jupyter is very helpful for that. For something like Django development, you can still use it, but it is not going to be very useful. All right, perfect. Shravan is asking, in this we use Python as backend and HTML CSS for designing, and Django is the framework which manages this, right? So yes, Shravan, basically Django is the backend part for us. Right? Django is the backend part for us. So what Django will allow us to do is, it will allow us to render different views. It will allow us to render different templates towards the front end. So we will be doing the most of the front end in HTML and CSS. We might also add some JavaScript to it, but from the backend, Django might inject some extra features into that HTML. Right? So Django might change the HTML before sending it out to the user, depending on what the URL is and what the state is. All right. Perfect. Cool. So I suppose that is it. See you guys again in tomorrow's lecture. Same time, 6:30 to 7:30. The link to the GitHub repository is in the video description. The link to the previous series is also in the video description. All right, then. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye-bye.